Episode 270, Seed Sovereignty. This is the Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. A big shout out and a huge thank you to KLM, I think that's how it's pronounced, for the coffees he tossed my way on the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website. Very much appreciated, as were your kind words in the comment on episode 266. Thank you again. To today's matters, who owns the world's seeds? Who indeed? Way back in 1980, which is an odd thing to say having lived through that year, but I digress, back in 1980 the US Patents Office approved a patent for a biological entity, a bacterium. This one ate oil spills or some such thing. There's a link in the show notes so you can look that up. This opened the floodgates though, and before you knew it, the Monsantos of the world had piled in. So what's going on? Patents have been issued on things like Roundup-resistant corn, as an example. This has a few implications. One, you need to buy new seeds each year from Monsanto. So you become wedded to the seed supply company. 3, you become wedded to the Roundup supplier. 4, Monsanto turned out to be both. 5, such seeds were the end result of much hybridisation prior to the genetic modification for Roundup resistance. So that 6, they were bred to the, in inverted commas, green revolution standards, link in the show notes, and therefore literally needed chemical inputs to produce to their advertised returns. All this meant a triple income for each seed sale to Monsanto. The profits from the seeds themselves, the Roundup, and the fertilisers all went back to the Monsanto shareholders before they were bought out by Bayer. Now, once these things had been sown, Monsanto realised, or perhaps hoped for, I'm being a bit cynical there, pollen drift to neighbours of the GMO growers. Having been granted a patent for the Roundup-ready corn, this pollen drift was deemed by Monsanto and the courts to be an unauthorised use of the patented material. Many farmers were bankrupted because someone else's actions led to their corn being contaminated, and the Monsanto lawyers went for the jugular. The perversity of it all is gobsmacking. A remedy in law was developed that required the affected farmers to get in first. This meant continual testing of their corn, but once the GMO was detected, a cease and desist letter could be sent to Monsanto demanding they removed the unwanted product at Monsanto's expense. But do we really need to patent seeds? It is nothing but a time-limited monopoly for the biotech firm to print money. If the patent didn't exist, what would have happened? What would have been likely to have happened? Not much, I suspect, except that other companies would have produced a glyphosate-based herbicide as they do now. It's off patent. The seeds, if as good as the marketing stated, would have dominated the marketplace anyway, particularly with the buy-in of the land-grant universities in the US and the deregulation of the Reagan-Bush administrations, and for that matter Clinton as well, but let's not go there. So less profit for Monsanto would have been the likely outcome, but a similar market share for these sorts of seeds. And this is a disappointing realisation for your dear narrator. I'll explain. The nature of the political economy following World War II was that of communism versus capitalism, the Cold War as it's known. That process and the memories of the 1930s depression kept rampant laissez-faire capitalism in check until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. By then, the collective lunacies of the Thatcher-Reagan, in inverted commas, reforms had become entrenched. There's a graph on the transcript over at worldorganicnews.com/episode 270, which shows the rate of glyphosate usage increased until about 2008, when the financial crisis hit and then peaked again from 2010 to 2016. After that, legal actions might have had an effect, but the trend is upward again. The point I'm trying to make is this: given the commercial background, the political milieu and the triumph over communism, the industrialisation of agriculture has created a set of seeds that do okay under glyphosate, chemical fertilisers and irrigation. This can be considered the recipe approach to farming, well, cropping anyway. The calculated inputs from a series of soil tests are provided by the seed, herbicide and fertiliser manufacturer each year. The timings of each are prescribed and a commodity is collected at the end of the season, in this case, the corn. I can't remember where I heard this, maybe an interview with Gabe Brown, maybe another cover crop pod I was listening to. But things in the US are now at a point where a farmer will commit $800,000 at the start of the season in the hope of harvesting $850,000 at the end. The weather still intervenes and will do so more obviously in the future as the concentration of greenhouse gases increases. But I think we can take that as read for this podcast feed. So government-backed crop insurance covers the weather risk. Now, as we have lived through the current human pandemic and seen variations in the effects of the SARS-CoV-2 virus because of gigantic variations within the human population, consider what a malignant corn virus or some similar disease would do to a crop that is essentially genetically identical across the US Corn Belt. It is not a comforting form of risk management to know that insurance will cover the grower, but the consumer will be left hung out to dry. Every nation-state on earth is at best 9 missed meals from rioting and revolution. Just remember the hoo-ha over the perceived toilet paper shortage. No, we need a better system, and it seems unlikely we can end the patenting of life. Mind you, the swiftness of change to same-sex marriage rights proliferating across the democracies of the world does give me hope for change in other areas too. The 100 monkeys thing I discussed back in episode 189 might be at play. In the meantime, we need to seize control of seeds ourselves. There are sufficient people out there who have hung on to older varieties of seeds. In Australia, they tend to be the older Mediterranean types that are growing fair amounts of food in their backyards, but also out in the bush there's lots of people as well who hung on to these older varieties of seeds, who saw the crunch coming, or who just cherished the crunch of a particular variety of carrot. Many varieties have been lost forever, but much still remains. Many community gardens across this wide brown land are into seed saving and redistribution. Seeds are best kept by growing them. This comes with risk, obviously. A prolonged heat wave and all the seeds distributed for growing and return in a local area can be lost. But at different levels, there are other organisations like the Organic Seed Alliance in the US, link in the show notes, which does much more than save and distribute seeds. They link local seed savers, run conferences, advocate for open-pollinated seeds and farmers and gardeners saving seeds, and a whole lot more. I was on one of their Zoom-based presentations last week on racism, colonialism and seeds. It was a very interesting listen. So seed saving is doable at all levels. Last week at work, we planted seeds from purple king beans we grew last summer. These went into the polytunnel because it's still too early to put frost-sensitive stuff outside. And we might manage another planting from these out in the open-air garden later in the summer. Just depends how the season goes. Each planting, growing and harvest adjusts the seed population's genetic profile to local conditions. Eventually new varieties are possible, but they're not essential. We just need to keep growing what works, I guess, and be aware of disease implications if some start to grow and occur. And for those of you who don't know, I work at a disability support organisation. We are now running 2 programs in the horticulture area, Tuesdays and Fridays. Now that's a good separation that allows me to water on a consistent basis, give things a good soak and then leave them for 3 or 4 days. The enthusiasm of the new group on Fridays has bled into that of the Tuesday group. Both can see what the other is achieving in a 6-hour day, and there's a sense of developing friendly competition. So we will see what happens. The changes occurring are inspiring for me too. I'll take some pics over the next few weeks to show the changes that I'm loath to call these people clients or service users. It's much more like working on the field pieces of my early adulthood. These individuals with their various diagnoses and life experiences are coming together as two teams. And it's really inspiring to watch. Tuesday's group knows the routine and things just start happening after we've had our first cup of tea that we begin each day with. Friday's group is only 2 weeks in, but individuals are stepping up, doing what they see needs to be done, and it moves my heart to see the enthusiasm and the outcomes they're achieving. Back on topic though, after that little variation. If you're using seeds rather than seedlings, please consider open pollinated types rather than hybrid. You can find these when you do a Google search on heirloom or heritage or open pollinated seeds. Particularly go for ones from your local area if you can. For a full explanation on the different types of seeds, there's a video I've linked to in the show notes, one I did last year, called Heirloom Seeds, so to give you something to think about. And there's plenty of material on seed-saving mechanics out there in the wilds of the interwebs. The process can be a bit fiddly for some seed types, but dead easy for others. And there is a deep satisfaction in continuing the cycle of life. If you're thinking about or even ready to make the leap into growing, go to the website worldorganicnews.com/free ebook. That's with 3 E's there in the middle. And you can get a hold of the free ebook, obviously, called the ChangeUnderground No-Dig Gardening System. Or you can just click on the tab or inside the hamburger if you're on the site. If you have any questions, thoughts or suggestions, there's the Change Underground podcast group on Facebook. You can find it by searching on Facebook, or there's a link in the transcript. Remember, decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week.